we're going to start by calling this unit Basics of Genetics, which means we're going to look at the basic things and we're going to figure out what goes on. Now, in this, we're really talking about Mendelian genetics rather than, the fancy type of genetics they do nowadays, and we're looking at how material is passed on from one generation to the next. In here, we start out by defining what we call a gene. Gene is the root word of genetics. It says gene is a segment of DNA that codes for a specific polypeptide. That specific polypeptide is going to be a protein. So when we look at this, a gene is there. The gene codes for the protein therefore does something in the organism. So a gene is of extreme importance in here. It says we have a chromosome. A chromosome says it's a unit of DNA that contains many genes. The exact number of genes really depends on what sort of organism you're looking at. Some of these things have lots of genes. Some of them may have a few. If you're looking at a bacterium, a bacterial chromosome is going to be much less complex than something you would find, let's say, in a human. When we look at chromosomes, we often see these in photographs. You can see this particular picture up here, and the dark bodies on the center, or the colored bodies on the center, are called chromosomes. Chromo meaning colored, some meaning body. Now, we often represent chromosomes like this, and that's one of the things that we're going to use is a representation where it's really a bunch of DNA filaments coming together. Now, these filaments are intertwisted and intertwined to make something much more complex, but they do look like this. And often we see two of them together, because when we're dealing with genetics, we're talking about normally having two copies of this. When we talk about chromosomes, we talk about those that are homologous. This would be the same chromosome, which means on each chromosome here you would have the same genes. Now, this becomes very important when we look at genetics, because you're going to get one set of chromosomes from the mother and one set of chromosomes from the father. And those, therefore, are homologous chromosomes because they would have the same genes. Now, in reality, in humans, you get a whole bunch of sets of a whole bunch of chromosomes from the mother and a whole bunch of chromosomes from the father. But if you've got one that's got genes, let's say, that determines your eye color, those genes would be found on two homologous chromosomes. One would come from your mother, one would come from your father. Other definitions that we have to deal with. We have to deal with diploid. Diploid comes from the concept that, again, you get one set of chromosomes from your mother and one set of chromosomes from your father, so you really have two sets of chromosomes in there. Okay, we have the concept over here of looking at this particular piece of corn, and you can see that it's got all sorts of neat stuff in it. What's it got? It's got purples, and it's got whites, and it's got crinkles, and it's got other things. This is a diploid organism. In order to make this, we started out with two gametes, two haploid things, but we ended up with a diploid. In here, we can look at colors. You see a smooth white one. Next to it, you've got a smooth purple one. Over here, we've got a wrinkled white one, and we've got a wrinkled purple one. When we deal with these things, since they are diploid, we often talk about something being dominant. Dominant means you need one copy of a gene in order to have that particular characteristic show up, because that gene is a dominant gene. The other concept we have is recessive. In a recessive, you would need two copies of that particular gene. When we look at humans, blue eyes is a recessive characteristic. On this particular ear of corn, we're going to find out that wrinkled is actually a recessive characteristic. If we went and counted all of the things out here on the top of it, we find out that we've got 65 smooth. We are going to have 21 smooth purple. We're going to have 18 wrinkled white, and we're going to have 7 wrinkled purple. And geneticists often count these things to be able to figure out what sort of ratio we got. And in this, we're going to figure out that, hey, wrinkled purple is actually a double recessive. So we can look at these in a lot of different ways. It says smooth, you've got 86. Wrinkled, you've got 25. White, you've got 83. Purple, you've got 28. So smooth is going to be a dominant characteristic. Wrinkled is going to be a recessive. White is going to be a dominant characteristic. Purple is going to be a recessive. When we're dealing with genotype, we're looking at actual genetic makeup, which means we're looking at the genes that you've got in there. A lot of times when we deal with genetics, we talk about phenotype. Phenotype is the actual physical expression. You can see the white, you can see the purple. But the question is, do you know what the genes are? Okay, so we look at genotype and phenotype. It said again, we've got 65 smooth white, we've got 21 smooth purple, we've got 18 wrinkled white, we've got 7 wrinkled purple. This is our phenotype. This is what we actually see. If we break these down, we know that based on the information we've gotten, that dominant is going to be a smooth, we're going to represent it by an S. Recessive is going to be a wrinkled, and we're going to represent that by 2 lowercase s's. Many times when we do this, we represent the dominant as a capital letter, the recessive as a lowercase letter. The white is going to be a dominant. We're going to represent that as a capital W. The purple is going to be a recessive. We're going to represent that as 2 lowercase w's. So if we look at the different materials we get, we can figure out that smooth white means that what we need is we need 1 copy of the capital S and 1 copy of the capital W in order to get a smooth white kernel, which gives us the possibility of having a capital S WW, a capital S lowercase s WW, a capital S capital W lowercase w, and a capital S lowercase s capital W lowercase w. Right? So all these possibilities would give us a smooth white. If we're looking at a smooth purple, we know that a smooth purple has to have 1 capital S and 2 lowercase w's. So we've got 2 possibilities in here. It says capital S, lowercase w, capital S, lowercase w, lowercase w. If we're looking at the wrinkled white, we know that wrinkled is 2 lowercase s's, white is a capital W, so anything that has 2 lowercase s's and 1 capital W would be a wrinkled white. In this particular case, it says lowercase s, capital W, or lowercase s, capital W, lowercase w. Now, we get to the wrinkled purple. We know that in order for it to be wrinkled purple, since both of these are recessive, it's got to be a lowercase s, lowercase w, lowercase w. So when we look at the phenotype, we are looking at different parts in here. We're looking at physical expression. When we look at the genotype, we have to know what the actual genes are. In this, the only one of this example that we can actually tell what we've got as far as genetics goes by looking at the characteristics of the phenotype is the wrinkled purple ones. Another characteristic we look at is what we call homozygous versus heterozygous. Homo means same, hetero means different. So in homozygous, we are going to talk about where both of the genes, or both of the alleles that we have, are the same. In heterozygous, we're going to look at them being different. So if we go back and we start looking at this, and we pick up our smooth white, it says that smooth white in that particular group, what do we got? We've got cap S, homozygous, cap W, homozygous, so that's homozygous for both characteristics. We could have a cap W, which would be homozygous for the white. We could have a cap S, which would be homozygous for the smooth. If we look at the smooth purple, well, the cap S is homozygous. The lowercase w for the purple is homozygous. So we have those being homozygous. If we look at heterozygous, what do we get? The cap S, lowercase s is heterozygous. Okay, so we could see that. Here, the wrinkled white, it says lowercase s, cap W, that's going to be homozygous for both characteristics, whereas the lowercase s is homozygous for the wrinkled characteristic, but the cap W, lowercase w, is heterozygous for the white characteristic. So when we look at these, we can see that, whereas the wrinkled purple is homozygous for all characteristics. So when we look at homozygous, heterozygous, we can either be looking at that pair of genes and whether or not the two alleles or the two parts of that pair of genes are the same. So therefore, when we look at genetics, we have to understand phenotype and genotype, and we have to look at homozygous and heterozygous. Very important characteristics.